Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and welcome back to Fanalysis. Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm Callan. This is Matt,
Hey guys, welcome.
and this is Evan.
Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here.
So yeah, we're going to start with our general expectations going into this one to begin with, and then we'll move more freeform into positives and then negatives after that, and just kind of see where the discussion takes us. So, starting us off, should we go with you, Matt?
Sure. So I want to say that this was something that I haven't been paying very much attention to over the years. There's been a lot of press about it since it's been in production. It might be accurately described as a production hell on some level. I don't really know. I haven't researched it, but I feel like it was announced a long time ago. Like I feel like it's been around like 7 or 8 years. And I think that the original creators, Brian Nitto and Mike DiMartino of the cartoon, of the classic cartoon, I think they were attached to this for a while. In fact, I know that they were because they wrote some. They're still credited as having written some of these episodes. But I feel like they were announced as having left like 4 or 5 years ago. So I feel like it's just been around for like a really long time. So long that I lost all interest. Yeah, I just by the time that this rolled around, I really didn't have anything invested. When I saw the trailer a month or two ago, whenever it first was released,
hmm
I thought it looked almost perfectly average. Like it looked like it was going to be good looking, but
hmm
ultimately not end up being in any way necessary. Um, I was surprised that some of the things I thought didn't look so great in the trailer looked better than I thought they were going to look in the final version. And I was also disappointed that the things that annoyed me far more than I ever thought that they would. That the biggest thing being the writing, which we'll talk about more later. But I was kind of shocked by the quality of this. I was surprised because I was expecting completely middling, just average, and it got actively bad for me. Like in a lot of the latter series or latter half of it, for example. But that was my opening impression. Evan, you want to go next?
Yeah, no problem. I actually follow a lot of similar lines to you as far as expectation goes. I would say probably I would say like in the year or so leading up to it, my expectations maybe increased just a little bit, but that more kind of had to do with the fact that live action adaptations have been allegedly, I haven't really been following many of them, have allegedly been increasing in quality recently. So because of that, I was kind of hoping like, okay, even with the original creators not being present, maybe it'll surprise me because it does seem like that in itself has been a little bit of a trend lately. So I was like, I would still say my expectations were pretty neutral, but there was just a hint there of like I was hoping to be surprised. And I was, not in necessarily in the ways I was expecting. I will say, structurally speaking, when it comes to any remake of anything, what I always hope going into it is that I don't want to see beat for beat exactly what I've seen before. I want it, obviously I want it to be faithful, but at the same time, if you're going to remake anything, make it put your own stamp on it, make things better or make things a little bit different. Have this adaptation stand on its own in any way, whether it be for better or for worse. Like any remake, I don't want to just like I said, I don't want to see the exact same thing. I want it to either be better or I want it to be different to where even if I don't like it as much as the original, I can still appreciate what they're trying to do on an artistic level. We'll get into whether or not they succeeded in that. I will say this, like in all seriousness, like jokes aside, I do actually appreciate that they made the effort to change certain things, add certain things from the expanded Avatar universe that came later after the original show, kind of trying to retroactively put that in. From an artistic standpoint, I do appreciate that. As you were saying before, Matt, the trailer when I originally saw it was also kind of iffy, but like from a visual standpoint, I was actually very, very impressed. I mean, even with a company like Netflix behind it, a show like this is not, necessarily in and of itself the easiest to do in a live action setting. So I feel like, things like the CG, the costumes, the sets, like a lot of that was actually very impressive. And, I was glad to see that. Again, much like you, a lot of my gripes come from the writing, some of the casting, and just the overall scope of the story. So, like I said,
Yeah,
we'll cover
I
that later. So basically,
well,
at the end of the day, it all just kind of like It has some moments that are like really high highs for me, but the lows are really painful. And because of that, that severely holds it back. I think structurally it has a lot of things going for it. And like I said, I can appreciate the attempt to, reinvent it and change it in ways that, maybe from their perspective really were improvements. So from that standpoint, I can appreciate it. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of a lot of it holds it back. And we'll get more into that later on.
Yeah, we'll get into specifics in a bit, but first, Callan, will you share your thoughts,
Yeah,
please?
much the same as you guys going in. Expectations were pretty low, not because I had any bad faith with the production at all, but just when it comes to live action adaptations for these sort of things. First of all, personally, I never need them. To me, it's
Yeah,
always a case where
agreed.
why we've got the original, it's animated, it works. It's always going to be better animated based on the material that's being shown, things like the bending, etc. It just can't really ever be as good live action from the nature of what real human beings can do with their bodies, and what effects you can do, and the inevitable budget issues that are going to be involved there.
Um,
But that's true of all live action stuff, So my opinion of it going in was I didn't want to get my hopes up because I never do, and I didn't have high expectations because the average is never that good regardless. Usually when I watch something like this, I have a pretty snapshot impression, a pretty instantaneous snapshot impression that I can present to people. This is my opinion on this roughly, and then I'll go into specific details and I'll expand upon those and I'll improve those with later viewings or more thought. I watched it literally all today because I didn't have enough time to watch it before now to batch watch it. So it's all very fresh, and I think I mentioned to you guys before we started that this is the best kind of description of what I think about this coming out of it now on the other end is that it gave me about 60% solidly okay, 40% just what were they doing, and the what they were doing questions. This is leading it back to my expectations. The what the hell were they doing bits were coming up in all of the wrong places for me. Like the things I thought they would naturally have a better chance of succeeding at, they seem to have just fallen off a cliff with, and I don't really understand why.
so
But
It's really unlike anything I think we've ever covered before, and I guess that in and of itself makes it memorable. But it is, we
well,
struggled to put a outline for this to tackle it.
so
So
I
that's
think it's a common
so
theme as well. A lot of people have been talking about it this way. They seem to be very much kind of like, good but odd, and it seems to vary across the chain
to
of what people are saying about it.
to circle back to something you were speaking to a few moments ago when you asked why even do an adaptation like this. There's a couple of reasons, and to me, only one of them is like super valid. I guess it's valid to want to make money.
Mm.
That's the one reason from the studio's perspective. Like that's why they're doing it, right? But before there was such a time when you would think of, okay, well, it's cool to have like the X-Men on like your Saturday morning cartoon in like the 90s or even
which is
before
coming
that.
back.
There were earlier versions of it, right?
Is coming back.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And that looks kind of fucking cool actually. But anyway, it's also kind of weirdly dated because it's like exactly the same
Yeah.
style. But anyway, there are earlier hulkier versions of the X-Men even. Like and that's just one example. But like if you grew up, there was such a time where like if that was the adaptation you had and you thought, well, that's cool, but they can't show Spider-Man punching somebody. That's like a rule. So like the fights are all really lame. Or they adapted this story, but they had to change it because there was like some sexual overtone in the comic and they had to take it out for this. It's not the real story, really. And so there was such a time when like the live action version with a more mature audience in mind was considered like a heightened version of the art form.
Mm.
That's really no longer the case anymore for like a lot of things, especially like stuff that's being made like right now. If you have Netflix, put this on hold and watch Blue Eye Samurai instead. Watch that if you haven't already. That's amazing. Watch that instead, okay? If you have limited time to spare, go watch that. Um, but that needs no adaptation. Invincible needs no adaptation, although I think it's getting one. You know what I mean? It's
Inevitably,
like
yeah.
it's just not a heightened version anymore. This arguably, and I think we can transition into one of the problems here, although I do want to give it time for like
Yeah, well, we'll
positives
do
here.
positives first, yeah,
For,
but
for,
maybe we'll.
for, for me, just as an overarching critique here, the one thing that I said to myself, like, what's the point of this or what's the value of this? You could make this. grittier and darker
Mm.
and more violent and more adult than it was allowed to be on Nickelodeon. I don't think you need to, but you
Mm.
could do those things in this adaptation. And in some senses, they did do that,
Yeah, it was
but
weird because they did, but so inconsistently to the point of
it's this
what?
really
It's
this
Yeah,
just
weird. I want to park this one because
yeah.
we'll get into it in specific detail later. But for me, it has this bizarre combination of being more violent and more just less restrained in that sense,
Mm.
with much dumbed down writing, which is
Yeah,
a
it
terrible
comes across
combination.
blander as
You
a
know,
result. Yeah, they lean on it a bit in
it's a
certain
it's
weird
scenes.
confused.
tonal
You know,
Yeah.
imbalance.
it's
Yeah.
completely confused. But before we do that, I do want to have a time to discuss anything we thought worked. So
Mm.
I won't go first. I'll invite you to because I
I'll
Well,
don't have
go
very
first.
many
well, just
positive
before we
thoughts
do
to
it, I
say.
think we can agree that for both positives and negatives, we're going to be all over the place with this because for me,
Mhm.
it wasn't like the music was perfect, the choreography was perfect. There's been good and bad in every category, seemingly at
Yes, for
random.
sure. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we'll start with you, Evan, but I've got a particular one in mind that
Yeah.
comes for positives.
Well, yeah, it's like I was saying before, like from a structural perspective, because I think we really need to like, hammer in the fact that like, people who may not have, watched this is the fact that yes, it is a retelling of the first season of, Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it they change a lot, like a lot of things, and not just because there's less episodes, like literally entire story arcs are altered or presented at different times. Sometimes certain literally things happen in later seasons that they just fuse into this season that just kind of show up, you
Yeah,
know?
particularly
And here's the
mid-series,
thing.
there's a big old
Yeah,
sandwiching of like 4 or 5 different episodes into one
it's
set piece, which was interesting.
and yeah, and it makes for a very, like, again, getting into negatives, it makes for a very weird, like, tonal time of it. But what I will say from like a positive perspective, like I was saying earlier, I don't want a remake, any remake, bad or good, to be shot for shot. Like if you're going to do this in any capacity, give me something new. And in that respect, we do get certain new things, some of which are really terrible, others I actually liked, adding some, we see things that honestly have never like ever been shown in the series before. We see, the fall of the air nomads. We see, I mean, we see, things like the duel between, Ozai and Zuko. I'm not a big fan of that, but again, I'm just bringing up things that we saw that we see. We see. Speaking of which, speaking of Ozai, we see Ozai and Iroh speak
Yeah,
to each other
that they
for the first
kind
time
of share
ever.
a word. Like I knew
Um,
Matt's expression was going to be that because like, oh look, here's the scene.
we
Except they've
also
Yeah,
done nothing with it.
we
can
also
I can
see
talk about that in the
yeah.
positive segment.
We,
That's a
no,
whole
no,
other
I'm not
thing.
saying it's positive. I'm just saying from a structural standpoint,
Yeah, it
I
happens.
like the fact, yeah, yeah. Whether good or bad, I do at least appreciate the fact that this remake is attempting to put its own spin on the
Hmm.
narrative while also being an adaptation. And again, I think structurally that is something that any remake should do because oftentimes that is what makes the most well-known remakes like the best remakes. Like there is a reason that when most people talk about like The Thing or Ocean's 11 or Scarface, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about the remakes of those films. And that's because those films took those concepts and, put it in a different way that made it overall, a better product than the original. And they put a new spin on the story. Let me be clear though, that this adaptation does not succeed in the sense, the same way those movies did. But like I said, from a structural standpoint, I like that they are attempting to do something different. I like the fact that they give us things that we know happened, but we've never, ever seen before. And I like the fact that they are, whether good or bad, the fact that they are retroactively trying to tie in things that didn't even exist originally back into the lore, back into the place that you would imagine if they did exist at the time, they would have shown up. I appreciate that. Again, and I think that kind of sums up my view on the series overall is the fact that a lot of interesting ideas, but it's the execution that's a complete misfire. And so from that standpoint, it's kind of like it's a double-ended. It's positive and it's negative. And to get more specific, I liked some of the casting. I like, like you brought up the music before, Callan. I thought the music overall was fine. I mean, there weren't any standout moments for me, but the fact that they clearly, remade some of the tracks and kind of played them, in their own way, I
Da,
appreciate.
da,
Yeah,
da,
yeah, I
da.
appreciate that as well. I appreciate that
Every
as
single
well.
time the Fire Nation comes on the screen.
Yeah, The costumes actually were surprising to me. I did not think I would enjoy the costumes and some of the makeup work as much as I did. Some of them were terrible, but others I actually
Yes.
really liked because there's some design. Plus, there are some designs I could appreciate the fact that yeah, like you're never really going to be able to get that to look perfectly in live action. So, in that sense, I think it's fine. Again, big swing, big miss. So
I'm
overall,
gonna
yeah, and again, some of
can
the
I
casting I liked as well. So
can I
yeah,
can
those
I
were my positives.
can I cut in, and I'm breaking the rule because this is supposed to be a positivity segment, but the costumes, like, this is maybe a me thing. This is not like an objective criticism. This really annoyed me. Like just from the get go. It worked in the Air Nomad segment. The costumes, I was with it. But as soon as we got to like the Water Tribe, there was something so it was like almost too perfect a recreation where the clothing that Sokka and Katara were wearing, it didn't look. Also, just this is not fair, but I've recently rewatched like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is an amazing adaptation. It's the
Mm.
adaptation of all adaptations, right? And so I'm
Mhm.
trying not to compare it to the Lord of the fucking Rings. I'm so like that's not really that fair, right?
High
I'm not trying to
bar.
do that,
Yeah.
but the clothing the hobbits are wearing, like their waistcoats and their trousers, and that looks like okay, yeah, Sam's a gardener, and when he's not on his quest, he's gardening. Like those look
Mm.
like the clothes that they wear. These look like the actor and the actress playing Sokka and
It's
Katara.
Rings of Power instead of Lord of
They
the
look like
Rings.
what they are. Yes, they look like costumes, which is what they are. They're so perfect, and everybody that was a huge thing for me. Everybody looks like either like they're a cosplayer or they're wearing an amazing Halloween costume.
Mm.
It doesn't really look real,
Part
especially
of
the
that, I
attempts.
think, is the
They
fact that
tried
you're
to make it
translating it from
so
animation. Like there's a lot of
But the biggest thing,
blocky
yeah,
style animation stuff that comes from
and
the
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 design
bright
biggest
work they're
colors as
problem,
trying to be
well too.
faithful
It's
to.
animated too,
the
yeah.
vibrant colors, yes, it's trying to be too faithful to the cartoon,
Mm.
and anime characters don't really look like human beings, or human beings don't really look like anime characters, rather. And the hairstyles, some of this was like just too. It was too trying to do like the hair that the characters have,
Pyro.
and it wasn't all of them. Like Iroh, Azula,
Katara.
yeah, fucking Yue, like what? Like that
Yeah.
hair, that wig, like you know what I mean? Like Aku, like you know what I mean? Like everybody just looked. It was like the difference between watching Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's like
Mm.
that doesn't look real anymore. You know what I mean? It wasn't even Rings of Power. Like it was like The Hobbit, like the weird glossed over sheen. But
Mhm.
yeah, like the it was trying to be so faithful to the cartoon that I think something was lost. And it reminds me of the first X-Men movie, like in the year 2000, when they like Wolverine was Hugh Jackman. He was complaining about like the
The
suits,
black,
and like
like
Cyclops is like, "What do you want? Like
Prefer
yellow
yeah, yellow
spandex?" Like there's
spandex.
certain things that don't translate across medium. You know what I mean? It's like
although
I
he is
don't know.
getting the yellow spandex pretty
I'm sure
soon.
he
Yeah,
is.
he has to. He
Yeah,
has to.
yeah, but in the year
Deadpool.
2000, but in the year 2000, you would not have wanted him to have that. You know what I mean? It's like the technology is such that you can now it
Get
just
away with it.
everything is so much different. Yeah, and
Mhm.
also we've had like 20 years of Marvel
Yeah.
doing every like the most broad sort of like colorful costumes in the
Mhm.
time since. But you didn't want that in 2000. You
We
just
we
didn't.
may have to abandon the positivity first thing because every time I try and think, okay, let me bring in a positive now to get us back on track.
There's
I'm
really not
thinking
that much.
I
every
will
single. I don't want to say it's sparse because it isn't. I meant it when I said 60% of this is solidly good. But the problem is that it's portion. It's like 20% of the costuming, 20% of the choreography, 20%, probably more than that in that case, but 20% of the writing. It's all scattershot across everything. Every time I have a
Well, that was
criticism, I
easy
have
then.
an exception that's
That's an easy
yeah.
positive.
one. Yeah, but that's an
It's
easy one. So the choreography, I think, across the board for the most part was much better than I
Yeah,
expected it to be. So that's
yeah.
an easy one. You know what I mean? There was the occasional fight that sucked, Katara and Paku, but like
but
just for example,
very
you
faithful
know,
though, which is it's
but
weird.
terrible.
The
But it was also
spurts
terrible.
of faithfulness, like going throughout the story, I mentioned before we started the call. For the most part, it is trying to adapt, and that's fine. We don't, like
It
Evan
was
said, it's not a
faithful,
criticism.
but
We
it
don't
also looked
expect shot for
awful.
shot remake, but there are
Right.
portions of the story that just randomly jump into complete faithfulness, like shot for shot Prison Break with the Blue Spirit, pretty much exactly the same as the animation. Same with the Paku
Mhm.
fight. Some other instances as well. Just it plays out exactly like it did in the cartoon, and I kind of like it for that. But it's so
Mhm.
random
And we'll abruptly transition to something that's not even remotely close.
Yeah, and like Matt says, in the case of the parkour fight, it worked in animation. You can't go that far with live action unless you want to blow your entire budget. So they have to tone it down, and it doesn't look as good.
By the standards of this show, though, that looked worse.
That as well, yeah. It didn't even hold up to its own high standards. Yeah, it's true. So,
yeah, I think pretty much most of the stuff that was to do with Zuko versus Aang, the various times that happened, that looked really rather good. Pretty much, could we just lump all this into the general positivity? The fact that this is a very difficult thing to cast. Okay, very, very difficult. It's not just because of the stature of the characters. You're asking fairly young people, whether they're actors with experience or not, to also be convincing martial artists. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah,
it's a lot to ask. And I think, I don't know his last name. I think his first name is Dallas. The guy playing Zuko did a really good job. I think pound for pound, he looks the best in action as anybody, but also the kid playing Aang did a really good job. Like for, again, his age and all that he's being asked to do. I wasn't convinced by everybody. Sokka didn't get to do too terribly much, for example, like in terms of battle, but like the stuff that they did have him do, even when he was failing, it looked convincing. The choreography and just the stature of the cast, I think, rose to the occasion there. In other ways, I do want to say real quick, I don't want to crap on anybody's acting in particular, but I didn't like anybody's like acting. But I think certain people were able to give a better overall performances because they were striving through under the conditions of having just terrible writing.
There were a lot of sequences where it felt very forced because, again, it kind of comes down to the direction. And even though I do feel like a lot of the cast, clearly had maybe not like a perfect understanding of the energy of their characters because of the writing, I think that a lot of it had to do with directing, because there were a lot of moments like where I'm watching, characters, some of these characters, and I'm just thinking like, wow, if they had like better direction, I can totally see, this working pretty solidly.
It's both. It's the production. It's the writing and the direction.
Yeah.
It's not just the direction. It's like the writing is just like Ian McKellen couldn't do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it's interesting you bring up Aang, because like despite him being like one of the youngest people of the cast, his performance really surprised me, because like you were saying, Matt, he has to do so much in this role, both physically and from like an acting standpoint, and I was actually very impressed, honestly.
I think the scenes that worked the best for me with him were early on when he was with Gyatso. Those scenes worked for me pretty well. Some of his later work throughout works. There are many times where I'm not convinced that he was acting with like a partner. Like some of his scenes where he's meeting another avatar were so stilted, and they were shot in such a way.
Yeah.
They never touched. They never handed each other something in person. And they were green screened all to hell. So I'm not convinced that he wasn't talking to a tennis ball. The poor kid. You know what I mean? It's like I don't really think he had much to work with, and he was still giving his best. So it's, again, the performances. Some of them were able to give better than I could have under the circumstances. You know what I mean? It's like I would not have wanted to work on the production.
It's tricky to stay on positive with this, as I said before, because everything's so scattershot across each of the brackets of quality. So we talked about the choreography being, broadly speaking, quite positive. There's a few bits where they struggle, but you can understand it because, again, it's hard to get the casting right for people who can both perform these specific animated types of performances and also do the martial arts. The choreography.
Well, it's also just a question of how you shoot things.
Yeah,
which isn't the fault of the actors.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to get into now, because I have both positives and negatives when it comes to the acting and performances of the characters and how much they've embodied the roles. But to me, first of all, many of them were miscast, in my opinion. A number of these characters were people who were just, even if they were phenomenally perfect and the writing had been good, would not look to me like they could embody the characters, be it their visuals, be it the voice they're able to bring, particularly the voice in this case of a few characters, and also the nature of the writing not embodying the kind of real life version of what would be the animated show, because a lot of it was trying to kind of lean into the animated style, which I don't think always translate the way they wanted to into live action. But also, if in the cases of the characters I do think were cast well, the writing is hamstringing them all the way through the show. the glimmers of good
I would say that
moments.
about every character, though.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would.
that's what I mean.
Yeah,
That's true of everyone. Even when you've got a scene that's really good, or good at least, with the characters and the actors that are doing their damnedest with the writing, it's still always there. That
Well,
question of why is this line
did you
really being this way? Why is this?
did you have someone that you wanted to single out as a positive, or did you want to
For positive,
transition
I want to
into
talk
that?
about Sokka, because I did not expect to see Sokka in the character on live action. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't flawless, but again, I think most of that was down to the writing and the direction, because the moments where there was individual lines, there were individual scenes, the sparks of even the comedy, which is tricky with him, where I thought, okay, that's Sokka. That and just the way that the actor was delivering the lines as well was fantastic.
Was there anybody else? Because we can talk about this, but was there anybody else you wanted to single out as a positive? Because for me, that's a thing.
To me, I can't off the top of my head think of anyone that's as consistent.
Okay, so we'll
but
stick with
that
this then.
speaks all of
So
it then.
this can be the transition point. We can transition on Sokka because I had always planned to talk about him. Uh, I think, in my opinion, Sokka is one of the three most difficult characters to cast. There's Sokka, Azula, and Toph. Toph doesn't show up in this, and the reason for Toph, you have to be of a certain size, you have to be young, you have to be a convincing martial artist, and you have to be convincingly blind. And you're also playing a character that's very forceful personality that's going to take a lot of adaptation. Like they can't just transport that character from a cartoon. That just needs a lot of pieces to come together perfectly to work. It's a near impossible ask, and we didn't get to see what that looks like yet. Azula, that's a hard negative for me on this.
Yeah,
It's a very difficult
miscast,
character to
miscast
cast.
to
We'll
the
talk
nth
about that
degree for
later.
me. Not her fault.
Sokka,
Just
yeah,
doesn't
but
have the
Sokka,
same energy. Just doesn't have the energy.
no, but also the writing's terrible.
Yeah.
But I do agree. But the Sokka though, the reason that he's a difficult character to bring to life is different from the other two. He specifically doesn't have any powers, and even though he knows what he's doing in the show after a point in a fight, that's not his strong suit. Most of what he brings are ideas and force of personality. You know what I mean? And this actor got the hard God-given parts correctly. He looks like Sokka. His voice is like Sokka. He even has some kind of martial arts accomplishments and training, which is probably more than the character even requires. There's something though about, and I don't know if this is. I'm sorry to say that. I don't mean to call out anybody's acting and complain about it too much. I don't know if it's his fault or a thing of the direction. His face has almost no expression.
Yeah,
And
which is true
Sokka's
of a
the
lot of them. That
most
was an issue I had
animated
across
character.
the board,
I know,
actually.
but
Soccer in
Sokka's the
particular.
most animated of them, and it's just like, whoa, you know what I mean?
It's what I
And
wanted to spin off at the end of it. It's so
whenever he
close to being
wasn't,
bang on, but it's muted. It's soccer muted. And how much of that is the live
yeah,
action versus animation? How much of that was the direction he was
Right.
given, or what, or just his acting choices? I don't know, but I just wanted to say as a positive, he got much closer than I thought anyone was going to for soccer.
that's true, and I do think it's
Right.
I think it is the harder, like one of the three hardest roles to cast. Like I said, so it was in the ways I expected it to fail, it succeeded, but it's also like just like you know what I mean? It's like
It's not quite there.
and also what he's being asked to do is like a lot of this writing was a lot of the writing could have been adapted from the M Night version. That's not
Yeah.
like me just shitting on it. I'm serious. It's that bad writing. So none of these actors had a great chance here. But is there anything else? Because I can continue on into the negatives here. This is like a good transition point.
Positives, the visual effects alongside the choreography, both the bending were really strong for the budget they had and for what I was expecting going into this. The backgrounds and the set dressing and the layouts and things like certain specific setups like Kyoshi Island being bang on visually pretty much. Stuff like that was broadly positive. It got a bit distracting and odd sometimes. I mean, Amashu is a good example of the good.
Okay, so that I liked most of the visual effects. I can agree. Like especially like any stuff with like the Fire Nation fleet, like every ship, all the ice and all that stuff looked good. Like the Armada looked good. The actual battle in the final episode looked pretty good.
Terribly directed,
whenever
but
they
looked great.
But whenever they shot the bed, it would be like when Kyoshi was doing stuff, it just looked like a CGI monstrosity.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
This is the thing. This is what I said before. That
like,
every positive and
terrible.
negative is so scattershot. Like everything good I have to say about this show is bad in 3/4 of it, or vice versa.
Sure.
Right.
You know,
literally like doing
yeah,
this.
it's just not consistent in any bracket.
But on the question of like, was there anything else positive for you?
No,
Evan?
no,
I'm kind of
those
on
were the big ones.
to transition here. Like,
No, no, I just like building off from what you said about Sokka, like he in particular was one of those casting choices where I was thinking to myself, wow, with like better writing and better direction, I can totally envision like a world where he could just nail this
Mm.
spot on, and that was I'm just building off from that because
I, I,
I think
and
so.
I
I think
think,
with better
and I
direction, he
think
could have nailed it for sure.
And I think that's true, but I don't think that that's unique about him because I don't have any problem with the actress playing Katara,
Mm.
but she didn't do anything interesting because they didn't write Katara. They wrote somebody else. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. I don't remember a single word Tara or Azula say in this. That's a problem. It's a huge problem. I can't remember a single thing they said, like a memorable interaction. You know what I mean? Um, I think the single greatest disappointment I had in terms of a major character portrayal was Iroh.
Oh god, yeah.
And
Another
the
really
reason
difficult
for
one to
that,
get, to be fair. But yeah.
I
Mm,
think that's one of the easiest ones. If you find an actor of that many years, of that kind of experience, he's such an archetype. I
Mm.
think it is it's big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
I can agree with with the performance that Mako delivered
examples.
just vocally,
I think the
but
voice is the biggest
also
part for me.
the voice,
Hmm.
but
And the
also just the
choice of
bearing of it.
delivery.
This actor, I wasn't convinced knew what he was talking about. Like, in like 90% of his scenes, he got certain things correct, like being silent and sad at a funeral, which he could have done without. He could have been anyone though at that in
Mm.
that scene. You know
That
what I
was
mean?
one of the best scenes in the entire show for me, by the way. That one, and it says a
I
lot because
also
it's
I,
not
laughed
that
out
great
I,
loud
a
I
show.
in
think
that scene.
that
I
It's
laughed
not
out
that
loud in
great a
that
show.
scene. Because it's not because it wasn't him or Zuko that was a problem. That scene, if we can take a minute, I lost my shit laughing because the writing is so terrible. That scene begins with one of the people at the funeral, 2 feet away from like the grieving father, going, "Is it true that
Yeah,
he was
exactly.
the word? Yes, he'll always be known as a coward." And I just thought,
After that, I was giving it credit for being
oh
after that
my
part.
great
that
show.
was so terrible. But we'll get into all that stuff in a bit. But yeah, so the actors, I think, we're all facing a serious uphill challenge, and the portrayals suffered. But like the performances, I credit certain ones for shining through as much as they could. I don't want to diminish anybody as an actor. I just wasn't happy with the rendering of the character because I don't think they were given the solid tools. Iroh's a major character, so that was a big disappointment. But again, it's not just the fact that he didn't have the bearing, and he doesn't. It's not just the fact that he didn't convince me, and he didn't. The way that they wrote him shows that they don't have any confidence in the natural pacing for a story. One of his first scenes is with Aang. He's in such a rush
Mm.
to introduce himself to the honor and be all honorable to Avatar Aang. It's like, no, at this point in the cartoon, you helped Zuko shoot him out of the sky. Okay,
Mm.
like you're not supposed to be. The show knows you've seen it before. The show knows you know the story, and
It's
that's
leaning on
not the
that a
right
lot.
adaptation
And that's
mentality. You
not
know what I mean?
the approach.
You're supposed
Yeah.
to. It goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Evan, about standing on its own feet. Yeah, yeah. Like you said, it's good to try things differently, but also don't assume just because you can that everybody knows how the story goes. Like how boring is that? That's boring. It's just
It naturally weakens
it's
whatever you
not
bring.
right.
You could do everything amazingly, and if you've not done that, you've weakened your overall
You
product.
might as
So it's
well
just
be making a
wrong.
different show at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in such a rush to just get through all the. I mean, forget how much they cram into one episode, which is a huge
Mm.
problem.
Right. And these are long
But
episodes, by the way. Like like
they
each
are,
episode,
yeah.
bet- like between
They
45
had
and
time. Yeah,
60
Yeah,
plus minutes.
they had time. Yeah, they had time to not do this. You know, there's no reason for it to be this rushed. Um, they don't they don't trust the pacing. They don't trust the audience. They don't have an interest, or rather, than in the story they're telling. And I didn't have serious concerns throughout most of the first episode. Like the first episode was decent, you know, like we're starting up there with like the air nomad attack, and then I thought, actually, the very first scene, I was kind of surprised by how violent it was with being burned to
mm.
death.
Yeah,
Okay, you're just
exactly.
showing
Yeah,
that.
I didn't
Okay,
expect them to go that far
It
with
like
it.
sets the
But it's
tone
all,
immediately.
but it's the
For,
burning. If you take away the burning to death moments, the entire show is
you're
way
right.
lighter in tone, which is odd. If you're going to
Exactly,
go dark, you
which
need
is
to
very
maintain
weird.
that tone.
yeah.
I
It's
mean, for
very,
example,
very
they don't show a
bizarre.
single death in battle all the way up to the battle at the end of the fight with the climax of the as the walls crumbling against the Fire Nation in the siege. And
But there's
apart
not
from
like,
that,
yeah,
you've got the
it's
burning to
not
death,
all.
and that's that. That's it. That's an
Mhm.
odd choice. And it stood out to me. It's,
It,
oh,
it,
that's the first time we've seen a death in this entire battle,
yeah,
and
it's
before.
more violent. and the
Yeah.
writing is not even childish. It's just not done. I mean, the whole thing with like Sozin and having him just kind of boringly just slump his way through, like, you know what I mean? That was where I was like,
Without any
okay,
comet powers either, because they're basically just firebenders, as far
well,
as
they
you can
did.
tell in this.
They
You know?
did have
No,
the,
they
the
have
No,
the
no, I
comet
know
comet
that's what
was
I'm
powers.
saying. The comet's there, but we're not seeing anything. It may as well not even be there for
That's
the
the
relevance.
implication.
They have to
The implication is
explain
what they
it
were doing.
afterwards.
The implication is what they were doing was comet augmentation,
Yeah,
which is what I'm saying, which is
They
what I'm
didn't
getting
pull
at
off that.
is it's boring. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's the whole thing was just kind of like I was still open minded, and it still surprised me with like actually being better than this in spots.
Mm.
But that was where I was like, okay, all right, we're just kind of tromping our way through. There was nothing especially creative about that, but all right. And then the first cringe moment that I had in the whole series, but it happened in the first episode, was when Ground started reciting the
Oh
opening
God,
intro.
yes. That was
Um,
full on
Oh,
M. Night Shyamalan
like,
vibes with her.
so
Everything she said was,
horrible.
"Let me deliver
why
the
can't
exposition and the point points."
It
And
was
why
so
can't they get
ham-fisted. It
like, you
came
know, if
off.
they ever make this again, Grand's banned from the story because I
yeah,
hated her in Ahmed's version and I hated her here. And it
Maybe
was so
start time
pointless. It was random
it
as
was
hell. Like
just just
I kind of already had
and
their version of that in the same episode
Yeah,
where they
exactly.
gave,
It's
you know
exactly.
what I
so
mean?
But the utter lack of
you don't need
expression in
it.
her as well. There's no emotion. It's just I'm here to deliver dry dialogue, and
I don't know
now
where they
I'm wandering
found
off. It's just oh my
It
God.
was it
it was so bizarre. It's so like I'm sure that actress's grandchildren loved the show, and she was just like, "Oh yeah, I'm happy to be here," but she didn't know what she was talking about.
it.
And I don't blame her for that. But it was like, what's the point of the scene? Like, why are you doing this here? Like
They
why are you doing it now? You know,
just
like
while we're roughly in the same
why?
area as well with the Gyatso situation, they misunderstood the entire principle of airbending in that scene too, because you've got this master airbender, the one that's tied to Aang, the one that we know the most about on a personal level, and all he does against this comet enhanced firebender is go, I'm going to try and meet your power with my power, which is not how Bagua or airbending works, and goes against everything we know about those characters. Look, watch
That's what
Tenzin
really
in battle, and we've seen that, and they go, you know what? Let's not do any of that. Let's just have him blast in with fire.
I mean,
that's a
they
nerd
tend
complaint, but I agree. It's part of the overall just package of boring. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It wasn't just a random firebender. That was the same actor playing the Fire Lord, right? That was
yeah,
Sozin.
that was
Like,
Sozin himself, yeah.
and he was sitting there like that was boring as fuck, and it was like even his dialogue was like, you might have prevailed another night but not with the comet, and I'm
yeah,
just like, oh
but we didn't
no,
see any of
no.
the comet enhancements.
It,
It was just boring
that was
firebending.
the comet
Like,
enhancement.
I
That
know,
was
but it's
it.
just so dumb. It's compared to.
The
I mean,
most
they didn't big up the comet at all. That was something they left out of the entire show. There was no the
But
comet's coming next year. Prepare for it. They just
they
left it out.
also and
it makes the
I don't
airbenders come off as even less competent because you could almost think of it as them not being comet enhanced and they still got absolutely wrecked. I
no,
mean,
no,
And again,
I
that's all
don't share
nerd
this
stuff.
complaint. Like this
But
was a
also,
limitation of
yeah,
this was just a lack of imagination on the part of the filmmakers. Like it's not going into the airbenders don't know what they're doing. It was, I mean, they had one who literally just spun her into death, like spun herself into death while somebody like flamed her.
mm,
I think Sozin did, but it was.
Mhm.
The real problem here though is just like the writing, right? Because and also like the things that they paid minute attention to were so random. Like the things the people who have or like us, like who are nerds with too much time on their hands have complained about
mm.
over the years, like how did they hunt down all of the airbenders? That's
They all came to
impossible.
the same
So they
place,
came to a
yeah,
fucking
and then
party. Yeah,
chose
it's like
not to
so
leave it when they got attacked.
that was but that's like a problem that didn't even need to be solved. It's just it was
Yeah.
hand wave anyway. Like that's just
Yeah, the
nitpicky
other
assholes.
attacks are
But
happening
that's the
elsewhere at
stuff
the
they
same
tried
time. That's
to
all they need to
fix.
know, with a massive display of
That,
comet
yeah,
power
and
to
you're
explain it.
literally showing something that's never been
that's
dived into before, and yeah,
That's how they
sorry.
choose to do
they
it. Yeah.
multiple times they answered those kinds of questions that really are not a problem. You know what I mean? And at the same time, the things that are so core and fundamental, they were like, I don't know what we're doing anymore. So I had concerns in episode one, but overall I thought it was decent. But the thing that really stuck out to me, the thing that really made me go, no, 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 you don't know what you're doing, do you? Um,
Mm,
Comparing the reason for the first unveiling of the Avatar state in this to the way that it was done in the original cartoon, it showed the difference in like the way that they're thinking about the writing, just like the drama, right? It's not just about the drama of the moment when Aang sees Gyatso, because that's not the first time we see him do it.
Mm.
They only I guess they only wanted one time for like the Avatar state in this episode for some reason. which I get. I kind of get you only want one moment, but then parse your story out, space it out more,
Yeah.
like have more padding, because the first time he's supposed to go into the Avatar state, when he is like off the boat, he gets shot out of the sky and falls into the ocean, and the Avatar state unveils itself. And the reason why that's so central, because that's proof that he is the Avatar, not just to the heroes, but to the villains.
Mm.
Like, there's no reason in this version for Zuko to know that he's got the Avatar. Well, I guess he's got like his glowy statue things, and he saw like the light. There's no reason for Iroh to know. You know what I mean? That was proof positive to everybody. Crucially, he bent an element other than air. It's like, that's the Avatar. Okay, there is no moment like that. In this, it's so you don't understand what you're doing. Like, just on a writing level, that was so important, and they didn't want that. They cut that out, and they didn't. You can change it. It doesn't need to be that exact way. But the point of the scene was that it was accomplishing far more than just one thing.
Mm.
And you cut
And they
it
dropped a
out.
few of those
and
all throughout the show. The things they chose to change and
Right.
drop,
Many.
they just didn't make sense
And
to me most of the time. And
And
I was
again,
someone
it
who
just
was
goes
pretty
back
impressed with the fact that
to
how much
like
they
the
managed to
film.
sandwich in. Like, I wouldn't have done done it with what they chose to do it with, but the things they did sandwiched in reasonably well for an adaptation. With everything going on
Right.
in Ashu, like 40
They-
It go-
episodes.
yeah, it goes back again to like the filmmakers, like they just assume you've seen all this before and you know it, so why
Yeah.
even try? But
Hey, look
again,
at
like
that
that's
cool little
not
thing. Look what we did. Yeah, but why that and not
Yeah,
this?
seriously.
Also, I haven't really like spoken to anybody else about this. But I have just from osmosis, I can see a little bit of what people are saying, and like Aang didn't learn any waterbending in this
Yeah.
season.
Katara didn't learn any waterbending at the season, all the
Yeah,
way
but
to the end.
Oh,
It's like, you are
to
a
be
master.
fair-
You arrived here
to be
perfectly
fair,
ready.
Yeah,
I know they did that very
to be
little in the show
fair,
as well, but they at least
was
gave the
also
note
that
that
was
there
a
were a
problem.
few things.
Yeah.
She had
It was
some
hilarious to me
tutelage.
because this is like a hand wave. It kind of works, but it's me being very generous and just like being open-minded about it. But I still thought it was hilarious that Grand just like taped that waterbending scroll. Like, here's this. I've always had it, and it was too dangerous, but it's not now. So go ahead. It was. And
Now
that's
you're
how
not
she
going to
learned
be
everything.
here endangering the people. You can
Now-
take it and go off with it.
No, they certainly didn't have time to do the waterbending episode, scroll episode. Like, they didn't. But it was one of my favorite episodes
Yeah.
of the first season. I knew that they didn't have time to do that episode, but that was such a hilarious, comical way of adding that in. Also, like the Southern Air Temple is one of my favorite episodes, and I don't know why they squashed it in to like 4 minutes, just to unveil like the Avatar state. Like, that really should have been its own episode, or at least that really should have been its own episode. Like, they needed more time with that one. And then we have like the extended Boomy.
Yeah,
stuff
why?
after the
Why
Kyoshi.
was Boomy
Why
required
is that?
here? Why you could have completely lifted Boomy out? He's a problematic character to do in live action anyway, obviously, and it's still they chose to go with that and fold in Jet, and the Mechanist also didn't need to be there. I mean, I guess
Yeah,
for the
again,
air,
what do you
the
think
balloon, maybe
energy-
you conclude that Jet didn't need to be there though.
a secret
So much
tunnel,
stuff.
like
Secret tunnel.
Secret
Why? That's
tunnel.
not even this
Like-
series. They just want to throw it in because they didn't think they might not be able to do a second series or
Secret
something.
tunnel,
I don't know.
Secret tunnel because memes. Oh,
Yeah.
this will get the people, and it was like. I mean, I kind of hated Secret Tunnel in Secret Tunnel. I'm not one of these. Oh my god, Secret Tunnel people. I'm not one of those people. Cave of Two Lovers is not one of my favorite episodes.
No, it's
But like, also, why is it Katara and Sokka going
Yes,
through the Cave of Two
exactly.
Lovers together? What the fuck? like, why is that happening? Or why did they like shot for shot, like as you pointed out? Why did they shot for shot like recreate the Oma Shu stuff? Like, and it was like the hippies knew the story. Like, why did they know this? You know what I mean? It's like, what are they reading, like ancient hieroglyphs or something? These are
It's just
archaeologist
weird.
hippies. Why are they just down there hanging out? Yeah, and it was all just, what this is, right? And that's not the right way to do an adaptation.
They're not even doing the right book. It just doesn't make any sense. They're just dumping it in.
doesn't even have any
because
relevance.
they were in Omashu. So let's do that. This was the origin story of Oma and Shu
God.
created Omashu. That was the only thread, because they're not thinking about it. And again, really they're working backwards from the point of people know this meme. They like this stupid song.
Exactly.
And for sure there's gonna be dumb people going, I love that part.
And to an extent, that's
saw that,
okay. To an
you're
extent, that's
dumb.
okay. Like it's part
not
of the old show.
okay.
The cabbage is
No.
the same thing.
Yeah.
It's
And
not.
let's-
But
It's not what
cabbage
you
is fine
build
'cause
a
it doesn't
story or an
disrupt the whole
adaptation
fucking
about.
thing.
Well, let's
No.
also not forget how they completely like misfired Boomy's whole character thing and the whole.
Oh my
Boomy,
god, they just I
like
blanked that.
it was
They crippled the whole point of him. First of all, he reveals who he is
yeah.
immediately, which undercuts the entire point of his being weird and and vague
The
about
character
things.
was like
But also he's
the character
bitter.
was
What?
yeah. Well, the character had things. The point of the character was to teach Aang a lesson, like
Mm.
in the original. Like he showed him to think about problem solving creatively, and it was like an introduction to concepts that become more central to the story as it moves forward. And it was also like a nice sort of uh different take on the time skip of yeah, Aang's entire people are gone. Oh,
But
but
here's
here's
one
this
at least,
remnant
a
of the
glimmer of
world that I
light. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But we
Like the
take
whole
that and we
point of
enshroud
the
it in
character on
bitterness
every
here.
level. And also the
yeah,
dialogue was like the
And that
dialogue
as
was
well, yeah.
weak all throughout, but it was
yeah.
terrible. Here it was like here it was really bad. Like, if you took like a literal line reading, it was just so bad. Like when Aang stands up and says, "Oh, I don't believe it. I don't believe you're hopeless. Challenge accepted." Well, because he challenged him in the cartoon. Challenge.
Also, it's
What
very
challenge?
a
The
smaller
challenge to
detail of
prove you're
that, but the lettuce
hopeless?
leaf joke, the lettuce leaf thing, just they try and force it in despite the
That
fact
was
they don't
so
set it
bad.
up. It's like,
Yeah, that was
why are
Yeah.
you doing this? It's a tiny outcome. It's not the end of the world, but because making that choice tells you all you need to know about the writing decisions they're making, and
Well,
it's just not.
that
yeah.
there was a
I mean,
moment
the
like
second,
that
yeah.
annoyed
I mean, the
me
second.
far more later in the show, but it was done with the same spirit. So I'm glad you brought that
Yeah.
up because there was
Well,
another lettuce leaf moment for me
Mm.
in the
yeah.
final episode. But
I mean, they literally turned Boomy the mad genius and just made him mad.
Yeah,
Like,
yes,
and bitter
and
again,
yeah,
which is the
also,
bigger crime for me. Like
yeah,
the
and
fact
they
that he
and
was
they
miserable about things. It's like what?
yeah, and it leaves also like during the duel, like they when he like takes off his cloak to reveal, they build it up like this was this big reveal, but we
Yeah,
already
nothing
knew
happens because it's not
yeah.
animated. And he can't be
It's
buff
like it
under the
doesn't mean
clothes.
anything.
Yeah,
It
the
also
whole
doesn't mean
thing.
anything too, like because it's like we already know that he's bitter and wanting to. He already fought Aang. Aang didn't pick him in the same
Yeah,
way he did. So
exactly. It's just stupid.
again, the undercuts it complete. Like you can't pretend like this is still a reveal because the way you set it up, now everyone's gonna be expecting it. It's so bad.
There was a bunch of like
Sorry,
pointless
like that
Easter
that
eggs. There
that
was
section in
no.
particular really pissed me off. Like
Mm,
wow.
That was where I realized we were in serious trouble. That this
mm.
wasn't just average. This was like Rise of Skywalker, like laugh out loud comedy moment. You know, like unintentional comedy for me. Like where okay, there are bits of quality here, but this is really just silly. And
I
it
mean,
stayed that
ironic.
way. Like
I mean,
it
ironically, they screwed Boomy up the same way they screwed Palpatine up in that movie.
mhm,
Mm.
yeah. But the uh where things really were falling apart for me, I think, was the fifth episode where we got into the spirit world.
Mm.
Now
Talk about dumping
this
everything in one go. I mean, they can never go back to the spirit
you
world
had the
because they've
blue
done
spirit,
everything.
yeah, yeah, you had the blue spirit, you had the fire sages, you had like the solstice, you had stuff in the past with like Azula and like Ozai and stuff. You had I don't know. I think Ira was a prisoner, like with the
Mm.
Earth Benders. At that point, you had I don't even remember exactly all the stuff with Ko. Like that was like a roller coaster of like, what are you even
They
doing
folded
anymore?
in with the
But
bloody Aang needs to get frogs to commit to wake up Katara and
yeah,
Sokka situation. Like they
okay.
Also,
folded
like
so many
again,
weird things together. They didn't.
And the owl spirit was there for some
Yeah,
reason.
why was Wang
Why was
Shi-tong
he
there?
there? Like
He's not going to be able to be used in
no,
the next series now, and he's a great part of it.
yeah,
So they've
now they
blown
see him in
all
a
of the spirits
library.
in one go, and not even resolved the Heibai situation. That spiritual crisis doesn't get resolved, which is the whole
like
setup
the
for the
only thing
damn
I
thing.
liked about it was the way that Heibai looked. That was pretty cool,
That
like
was
in
very cool.
baby. And then they have abruptly ejected him from like the story. You know, we're just
Never
not
returning
dealing with
to it.
that.
Yeah.
But like that was that episode, everything to do with it. But this is also okay. We need to stop right here.
Oh
This
yeah.
is the Roku
Yeah,
episode.
we're getting to
Like
the
this,
avatars. Oh my
this,
god, Roku being the just mind-bogglingly terrible. I mean, they
I
took one of the
Oh
best
my
characters in the
we
original
god!
show and they just went,
we
No, this is like this is like
just to
this
ramp
is
up
like
to
one.
this, can we set the stage a little bit just to ramp up to this,
Oh,
right? Because I thought I thought he just wasn't going to be in the show because I don't have a
they kept
beef with
replacing with
Kyoshi's
Kyoshi, yeah.
cool. Yeah, Kyoshi's
right.
cool, but she was weirdly emphasized to the point where in the original narration, like not Grams, Katara's, I assume,
Mm.
at the beginning when they were saying what the avatar is and showing like Kyoshi, to the point where when they said like when the avatar dies, right? Like they're replaced by like the next in the cycle, and they showed Kyoshi, and I go, well, I like Kyoshi, but Roku's the one before Aang, right? And it shows Kyoshi walking up like the pantheon, and then you kind of barely
You
see a
see
smidgen of
Roku sort
Roku.
of joining
It's
in,
like,
but then they omit him until we
yeah,
see him later on. It's like,
yeah,
why?
and it
Why
was
are you
so
doing
Aang.
this? And
It
Kyoshi's
was
my favorite
very
avatar, and I still
confusing.
don't think that she should be getting that level of
Yeah,
attention.
but like to your point though, like we see more of Kyoshi and Korok than we do Roku.
Yeah,
Yes,
why?
and that's its own
Why?
train wreck as well.
It doesn't make
Yeah,
any sense. But first of all, I mean, but we kind of missed the Kyoshi Island stuff as well. So when wrapping into this, I liked the Kyoshi Island
yeah,
episode. It was pretty solid.
Yeah,
They did way better with just the fighting alone than I thought they were going to do. Suki was great. They didn't, apart from
yeah.
the opening
I
salvo,
thought
which was a bit weird, but she did a good job.
Suki Suki looked great. She was one of the exceptions to me, where like the costume really lent itself to the live action, and the actress was great, but I just don't think they gave her very much to do. I
I
would
think
love
that's
for
why
her.
she worked, because the writing didn't have a chance to undercut her outside of the initial scene. Like, the
Yeah,
first
I guess
conversation they've
so.
got walking down the street is terrible, but after
Her,
that,
her
everything's
relationship
just
with
her and
Sokka,
Sokka just being hormonal teenagers. So
her,
it's like it's all chemistry,
Right.
yeah, there
nothing
was
else.
no,
I
there
mean,
was no,
I
there
kind
was
of
no
like the
substance to that.
training, but other than that,
It
yeah.
was pure
Yeah,
lust chemistry,
the
and then the
reason,
physical
the,
fighting they did.
the
Not the
reason
first
for
time that
it
comes
being
up.
the reason for what gave that its power in the cartoon was that Sokka had to humble himself after having a terrible impression of her based on her sex. In this, there was just, oh, he's a hot boy, I like him, and it was
Yeah.
just okay, all right.
Mhm.
Well, she looks
Also,
great,
weird little tiny thing on
but
top of that is when they're fighting, he's doing that whole stupid stretching thing, and then she attacks before he even has a chance to do anything. So that was like, I know it's a tiny detail, but that
that was
undercuts the
supposed
whole
to
"she's
be
just better than him" situation and makes it look like she
that
got a
was
cheap
supposed
shot.
to.
And it's like, why do you
There
do
was
that? That
a
undercuts the point of the scene.
Yeah.
you're right,
But
but you're
like,
overthinking it. That was a meet cute done poorly. That was like right out of Daredevil, like the Daredevil movie with him and his wife, his ex-wife, Elektra, like when they had a fight on the playground. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
I
know
get,
if
I
you
get
guys
the
saw it.
purport what they were
And
going for, but they could have achieved the same result without with him throwing at least one punch to get
I know.
like
I'm
the
saying
original
it's
show did.
terrible.
You
but
know,
like,
it's
I
just
know. I'm saying that there was a hacky moment, but that was the point of it. You know, it was just
yeah.
so that they could meet each other in a cute way. Like that was it.
Mhm.
Like they didn't
But
put any
like,
thought into it.
yeah. But like cycling back though to like to Roku for a second. Like here's how like it is so bad. Like here's how I see this. This is like somebody doing a parody of like Obi-Wan Kenobi
full
Force
on
Ghost, where like
parody.
people are like,
Yeah.
this is like, like in a parody, something you'd see like, oh, you must go to Dagobah. It's like, really? It's like, but this is him doing that, but it's completely straight, and it's so terrible.
I mean, the whole point I
It's
think
not
they're going
even
for is that I'm not
completely
straight
straight.
laced like Kyoshi. I'm supposed to be contrast
Yeah,
against your expectation. But
it's
that's
not completely
one,
No, but
straight.
like
stupid. Don't need to do
spinning
that.
it with
And
that
He's all
quality.
oh, hop on one foot and then and do
It's
this,
fucking
and oh, I'm just kidding, and then he's all I can't remember what. Oh, when we start talking about Ko, he's like,
Yeah.
oh, you should talk to Avatar correct about that. You know, and it was like,
but why were you the one who tricked
what?
him then? You know, it's like,
Yeah,
No,
but
it doesn't
like,
make any
and
sense.
then okay, so I haven't kept up with like the lore of like expanded universe stuff for like Avatar because I don't care. Like it's the cartoon for me. I don't know if somebody gave like Ko mommy problems and
They did.
like a
They did.
magic
The
thing. Does
face
that happen?
make a woman statue thing is a thing from that. I don't know much more about the comics than you do, but I remember
Okay,
that visual
because
in the
I was
comic
like,
when it
that
came out.
shit came right out of nowhere for me,
Yeah,
and I
and
was
also
like,
has
what are
nothing to
you
do with
even
anything,
talking
so it's just
about? Like,
pointless.
yeah,
But even that
it was.
aside, Roku was miscast, didn't act the way he should have been done, was directed wrong or whatever, and also lacked any gravitas in the voice. Roku is like 80% his voice, if not more, and there was just none of it.
The whole
So
package,
You see him
it
once.
wasn't Roku. It was like you said, it was parody bad, Evan.
Yeah, you see, they only have one major interaction through the
Yeah.
entire series.
And he's his
Like,
avatar.
Roku
He's
is
supposed
literally
to be specifically his mentor. You know, Kyoshi was
his
Roku's mentor.
predecessor.
You know,
Yeah,
it's not
his
Aang's.
immediate
no,
predecessor.
they clearly were just amping up Kyoshi to have like more because her character has got more going on these days, like with like the books and whatever.
Yeah.
Because I assume because they wanted like a woman to do something cool because there aren't very
Yeah,
many
that's the only thing I could
opportunities in
think of
this.
for it.
Yeah,
But then
like,
you've got
strangely enough, though,
Sugi for that
too,
in that
like
episode. You know, I just
yeah.
don't see the point.
And you
And
know
Kyoshi was
what's
wrong as
interesting
well.
about that
Kyoshi
one,
was just
though,
I'm angry warrior woman, and that was it. That's the
yeah.
one beat I'm going to be sticking to apparently.
Yeah, like not
I hated her and everybody like who shouted at Aang because they also
Yeah,
removed the point of what made his choice pivotal. Like when he ran away, it's like, well, he didn't really. He was just clearing his head, and
and
then
then a
everybody
storm
got
hit.
up in his face and told him he's terrible, he included.
seriously.
And I don't
There's
remember
nothing.
her scene too well. Her scene I thought was awful. It wasn't as bad
It
as
was the
Roku's
least
scene, but it
bad,
was
definitely,
awful.
but it was still
But
terrible.
the
Yeah.
reason the reason I'm talking about it is because I don't remember. Did she explain the comet is coming at such and such time, and you need to do so
No,
and
the
such
comet
before that
was
happens?
never touched on outside of vaguely
See
being in
that
the sky
she
and
was the
delivering
only
no power
avatar who
boosts in the
mentioned it.
first one. And at
Yeah,
the end, when we had the final scene, look, the comet's coming back. Ooh, it's like that was
yeah,
supposed to
they
be the
didn't.
big gravitas Roku set piece. That was supposed to be the
Right,
entire show set up, and they haven't done it.
that's what I was like. What was the point
I
of even
think
showing Roku then?
Yeah.
Because it was so terrible. But again, like the whole face stealer thing and the way it would do those weird illusions, like, oh, here's a magic talisman and he misses his mommy who gave identity to the world. And I just thought, what are you talking about? And that was like full on Shyamalan territory. And I thought, okay, with like I don't, my hopes are dashed, completely
Mm.
dashed. And our friend Antoine had already been through this, and he had said that he likes episode 6, and that was the next one coming up. And so I went in with high expectations. No, like episode 6 has like one good idea in it, and it's like the 41st division thing that everybody's
Yes. Yeah.
talking about.
That was a
yeah,
pretty good addition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
They
was
didn't do it
they're
right.
interesting.
writing they're writing it. People are talking about that like that was Oscar worthy or something. It was a
No,
good
no,
idea.
no. It was a cool idea,
Like
and that's an
it was
example
a
of something they
It was an
added and
interesting
how you
idea
can
that
make
was
something good with an adaptation.
consistent.
That was an idea of like, okay,
Yeah.
how can we make it better than the original? That is a good idea, but the problem is they didn't execute it right because the reveal didn't happen. There was no, oh, they learn about it. They hear about it the same way we do through exposition
well,
from Iroh, and he
also
goes, "Take my word for
the
it, guys.
execution,
He's the reason you're
Yeah.
brought through." And they're all like,
but also
And then he's like, "Oh wait, we're
like
the 41st division." He says it like
"Yeah,
out
yeah,
loud like
exactly."
that.
But with that, and he's
You
like,
need to
"Yeah,
yeah,
that's why I just told you, you just
it,
absolute moron."
but the execution of this was poor. So in this episode, this was sort of like the Blue Spirit meets
The
like
storm,
the
sort of.
Storm,
Yeah.
which are two of the strongest episodes and from the original. And this is just like I kind of hated everything about like the scenes in the past. Like they're not worth it for me. Just the nice payoff of the 41st being like loyal to Zuko. And again,
Mm.
like you guys said, it doesn't really go anywhere after that.
Mhm.
Um, but like the Fire Lord, like the whole misdirect of Zuko speaks out against the general's plan because they had the general.
Mm.
They had the general. So why not do it the way it was in the show? You know, it wasn't like we
Mhm.
cut out the general character so he just knows he's going to be dueling his father. The whole point was I'm not afraid to speak my mind about a moral issue. I'm not afraid or intimidated by this general, and he misinterprets who the
Insult was
disrespect
against, yeah.
was aimed. Yes, he doesn't expect to see his father. And the point you mentioned the duel earlier, Evan, and I
Mhm.
think you were being positive. The
Well,
point
I
of
wasn't.
that is
I was.
I thought you were sorry, like because you mentioned it
Well,
earlier, and I
it's
thought
a change. It's a. I was bringing it up in like the sense of like I like the fact that the adaptation is doing its own thing, but then it's like
Yeah, it was an
certain
example of a change.
that's one of the versions of a change that I did not like
Mm.
at
I
all.
hated it. Like this, the point of it is that it's not a fight. The point of it is he's refusing to fight. The point of it is that his father is cruel and crazy. And like you know what I mean? It's like the fact that it was a fight, like, yeah, he still bullied him into fighting in this version. But the point of it, the point I'm making, I guess, is that the moment in the show, cartoon, the original, was so much stronger across the board.
Absolutely.
All of it just worked so much better, down to the just the direction of certain shots where he's refusing to look his father in the eyes
Mm.
until he looks up and he's just crying. You know, it's like this was weaker. Like and everybody's saying exactly what's on their mind. And how confused is it that like in the show, I just got the impression that he got blasted in the face by some like fire, you know?
Yeah,
And
not
it's like I'm gonna hold my
yeah,
burning like
exactly.
hand on you. And
And
then
Iroh's
the
gonna
next time
stand
we
there and
see
watch
this
it,
character,
you
the
know.
next time we see these characters, he's coming to visit him in the fucking hospital bed. Like
Like
you
it's
kind of
fine.
care?
Yeah.
Like I mean,
they changed the whole dynamic with him, with his family overall, and we'll talk about Azula in a minute because that's the big greatest crime. But the fact they change it so that he's trying
This
to
was like baffling.
manipulate in a different way. It's like, what are you doing?
Also-
and Iroh just stands there and lets it happen. We're supposed to believe that he's standing there and watching his nephew being
To let it
torched in the face.
happen
One
and-
strike happening and instantly can't stop is one thing, and there was way more people present in the anime
But
in
the
the
fact that
cartoon to
there's
stop it.
build up to it,
I don't
like,
even.
you would-
I don't.
But
care.
all that's just detailing. But
I-
just all of that just undercuts
the
the theme of
Iroh
the
thing-
moment.
The Arrow thing, I agree, it's weak, but that's not to me. To me, it's just a human behavior thing. Like if you want to then have a scene where Ozai's visiting him in the hospital, like, like we're doing like an episode of like Law and Order here or something? Are we getting into really twisted psychology here? Like you're a battered, housewife in like the hospital and you're covering for your husband or something. That's not the way it's written. You can tell a story with that kind of depth. It's not written that way. It's also like Zuko like kind of agrees with his line of logic about like weakness because well sometimes if you let the weakness continue people become stronger. It's like no, it should be it's just a refusal or a refutation of his father's worldview. It's not like kind of agreeing that weakness has no place in our culture. It's like that's not the place for that. And for me, the fact that it's the 41st Division is kind of like a punishment almost, like he inflicts them.
Yeah, rather than
Zuko,
Zuko
like
demanding it. That should have been Zuko's
I thought
victory.
that's
He
what it
should
was
have
gonna
been.
be.
If
I
I'm
thought it was
banished,
gonna be
I'm
like
taking the
him to-
41st. I'll prove my
that
point.
would've-
I'll take the
And
new
for that
recruits that
reason-
haven't proven themselves. I'm going to prove my point. And they
Yeah.
didn't do it. I saw that as well, and that
And-
infuriated me.
And for the fact that that's not the way that it went, that's why I don't get why everybody's raving about it. It's a nice idea that's nowhere near as good as it should have been, considering what you wanted to do, like what you built it up to be, And also the idea that they've been selling around for 3 fucking years without any idea why they're doing it. Like seriously, you don't seriously.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of those things. I hated all of that, as you can see. But you mentioned Azula because I also agree that's a huge crime. Is the
Yeah,
fact that
first things first,
the-
not her fault, not the actress's fault. She was miscast for this role. She doesn't have the voice for Azula, and that's like again
Well,
with so many of the
Azula-
characters, such a huge
you're
part
not
of
gonna.
it.
Azula is not. You're not gonna get Grey Delisle's
You're not going to get the
voice.
same
You're not.
voice, but you need to get at least the
Also,
same
Grey
style,
Delisle-
and that's.
But here's the thing. I can. Azula needs some kind of change, adaptation. Grey Delisle was like pushing 40 probably when she voiced that role. It's so much maturity, expertise, like dynamite actress. You know
For
what I mean?
sure,
She's an
for
actress.
sure. But you need to be
Like,
in the same ballpark with
No, listen.
the line and the delivery. Like it has to be within the same
Somebody-
style.
Somebody who's that age and can also like perform martial arts and act on camera, like there's got to be some leeway. I don't require the same, but I do need something. I need some character. She had no character. Was the problem here?
Right.
And
Had
any character
zero
she was
character.
trying to portray was so on Azula. It was like begging for
had-
scraps at the table. It was like
Yeah,
she was out of
didn't give
control.
her
You know,
anything.
she was
It didn't have any. it
already
didn't have
being
any
compared against
impact.
Zuko.
They didn't give her Azula's defining character trait, which early on is that she's perfect.
Yeah.
And damn close. Like she's flawless. She's like deadly. This version they skipped right ahead to she's also mentally abused by father. Like we're starting with that character in that space. We're like, okay, you're not giving her any room to go as a character. Like this is okay, she's damaged. You kind of have a little bit of a like reveal a little bit with Zhao later on, kind of retroactively talking her up to be what we know her to be. That's
There's no
completely
believability.
unmotivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't see. We don't
There's
see
also-
we don't have any
It's not just a
expectation.
believability thing. She doesn't do anything
Mhm.
like to that affects anything on any level. Everything proceeded without her involvement. It's
Because she's not
yeah,
supposed
it's
to be
not
in this book above anything else. It's
Right.
everything they did with her was a bad choice that weakened the character. I mean, the fact that one of her best lines in the entire show comes at the very end of the entire series with her, don't talk to me like that. Don't talk to me like I'm Zuko. It's literally the first thing he does. Yeah, the cartoon. Yeah, it's the first thing they do in the show. Is he's talking to her like she's Zuko. So it's just
because they're starting her at the
completely
end of her arc.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
It's
so she has
so
an arc.
dumb.
Like she's not a
No,
character.
it-
Like,
It's not Azula.
I do
And
agree.
then any
like,
future work
I
with
didn't
her, it's not
buy-
going to have any impact.
I didn't
That's
I
the
didn't
thing.
buy the actress. I didn't buy the actress. You're right, but I'm not holding it against her in any
That's what I'm
any
saying.
stretch
Yeah,
of
it's
the
not her
imagination.
fault.
But like everything about it, from the writing to everything was just type. It was terrible. Like she and her friends, May and Ty Lee, I think looked the most like cosplayers actually out of the whole bunch. And also
The other two did embody the traits of the
think-
character though better though. To be fair, they didn't have any writing or anything to do, obviously. But in terms of like
And you can't
I can't remember a
snapshot,
fucking thing
particularly Ty
about them.
Lee,
Like,
you know,
No, I mean,
I can't remember a fucking thing they did or said, because I was just about to say, to me, every scene with them was pointless. What was the point of any scene that they were in? What happened?
seriously, they had, yeah.
And
just to
and
be
how did
there.
it change the trajectory of the other characters? The introduction for her even was like, what was that half-baked assassination from like a bakery, like
It was
sneaking
there
into the
only to
palace?
have look, we're burning
Yes.
people alive in this show. It seems.
Why?
Yeah,
It's just
We
weird.
didn't need that.
no.
It was setting her
It
up
was
to
so
be like, oh
bizarre.
look, this is what she's like. She's calculating, she's clever, she's cunning. But that
She
was
didn't
dropped
do anything but
immediately,
open
and
a
it isn't
door.
her anyway. So it's just
Mhm.
dumb. And also another small thing. But where was the blue flame? Like they give her like 2
Oh, yeah,
sparks of it,
that's not a
and then
small
jump
thing.
straight to the
Her
lightning.
name's Azula. Like, I mean, why is that? You know, like, yeah,
Like,
that's not a small thing. Where is the blue flame?
one of the most
I,
central parts of her iconography.
It
It's like,
shows that
really?
she's more powerful. It shows that she's colder. It shows that she's more direct. The way she uses her powers, etc. It just wasn't Azula in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't Azula, and the only sparks you get are the glimmers of undercurrent when you see her at the very end of the show,
this
the
is
original
why.
show,
This
and
is
it's
why.
so she's
This
dead on arrival basically, and she's
this is why
miscast.
I always said this about I'm interested to hear who else you think is miscast, because you said a lot of people are miscast. Is it just her
Uh,
and Iroh and
I say a
Roku?
lot.
Are you
It's
vigilant?
Roku, Iroh, Azula. I wanted to kind of say possibly Aang Katara, but I don't know how much of that is just the terrible
I
writing,
don't
terrible
think so.
direction,
Yeah,
because
I
they weren't doing
completely.
anything wrong. I don't want to criticize them at all. They were giving like I could tell, and to be fair, it's true
You
of
also
everybody.
have
I
to
could tell
remember
people
how
cared.
difficult asking
Yeah,
people
I
of
know
that age
exactly.
to do
I
all of this
completely
is.
get
You know
that,
what I
and
mean?
they've got to visually
One
embody them. They've got
moment,
to be able to get across the
And
maturity. I understand
I
all of that.
think
I understand all that, but
I
the
think
wooden nature of both of them, I feel like there must have been someone out there that could do more.
I
But
don't
they
think
weren't the big examples anyway. It was again Roku,
I think
Azula, Iroh, what was the other one I said a minute ago?
even Iroh. Well, I don't know.
It's
Like
just the delivery of the lines. Like every line was short and
even
sweet. There was
Iroh.
no the tone and the voice is one of the most important things when you're doing these kind of adaptations, because that's all you have to go on with the kind of character of the original show, outside of animation, of expressions, etc.
The
Almost
whole
all of
thing is
who they
that
are what you're hearing from their voice.
everything
And
about animation though is heightened. You can't voice a character the same
no,
way in live action.
of
It would
course,
be
but
so
to
cheesy.
be in the same
And
ballpark, though,
I'm
Roku,
not
for
arguing about
example,
it.
could have
I,
been
like
more of a
it,
Dumbledore type delivery. Just that would have been closer.
Roku, everything about Roku was wrong. Like I agree, but
everything.
don't even like we've already been through that. But like Iroh, I was gonna say, this I'm not even sure that the actor couldn't have done this well. His look was fine. It was the, at least to me, it was just what they gave him to do, how he said everything he said, but also like it's the writing for me. It's the production, it's the direction and the writing. The point of every scene he was in was muddled, confused, and even the things he said didn't make sense. Um, it's like his first thing is to be skeptical about, oh, you saw a light, so you think it's the Avatar? Oh,
Yeah,
blah blah. And he does say something similar in the cartoon. The spirit of the scene is, I'm having my tea. My nephew's obsessive. We've been down this road
I
before.
don't
I
want him to
hope
get
you're
his
not.
hopes up.
You know,
Is the big thing. He's
yeah.
trying to help. Pretty
The
much every
point of
moment
the scene is
with
wrong.
Iroh is he's helping someone. That's basically the standing point of every scene he's in. Is either doing something comedic, or he's helping someone, or it's both. And in this,
Yeah,
that isn't the case. Biggest offense of that for me was when he was imprisoned by the Earth guy, when he's being taken along on the wagon.
the whole point of
He
that.
should have
Yeah,
been
like I mean,
sympathizing with that guy, and he kind
that's
of
what he
was,
did in the
but for the
cartoon.
most part, it was just
No, he
like
wasn't really.
he was
Like he
like,
wasn't sympathizing.
you're broken and bitter, and it's my fault, but
Wasn't he?
that's not the point I'm taking away from this. He's basically saying you're broken. No apology. No, like
Yeah,
this can be difficult. He says, well, I was at war. We were at
I'm
war.
sorry.
You still are. And I was a soldier. Not an excuse. Like that is not how Iroh thinks or is or anything. So it was so.
well, it's a very different scene from like what they were taking from, and they were going in a different direction, and that in itself is okay. And I actually think that random like actor was a more convincing actor than anybody
He
in the
did
main
well.
cast,
Yeah.
Yeah.
than anybody in the main cast. But like bar none, but because he had like a backstory in this where like his brother, I wanted to say, or his brother or cousin, I can't remember, I think his
Brother.
brother was like a victim in the fighting. that wasn't the case in the version of the cartoon. He was just somebody who was kind of rubbing in the fact that they had captured this famous Fire Nation general, and haha, don't you feel low, and we brought you down. It's like, no, I acknowledge my defeat at Bossing Say, actually. That
Mm.
was the spirit of it in the cartoon, was that Iroh is a step apart from everybody else we meet, and he's not proud like Zuko, and the implication being that all the rest of the Fire Nation, or most of them, are like that. You start seeing those differences in his character. In this, they went for something that was completely different, which was calling him out for war crimes, which you have to go all the way with that then. You have to then have your avatar, your Iroh, engage with that discussion. Instead, he's just saying, like you said, no, you're just holding the mirror up to that guy, which leaches all of the Iroh-ness out of a
Mm.
potentially good scene. So again, writing. The writing there is the problem. The actor didn't fuck it up. Like, oh, he doesn't
Right.
have the Mako's voice, but who does? You know what I
Mm.
mean? And you could have
I'm
found
not even
somebody easily
expecting the
with.
same quality or anything. I'm just expecting to be in that direction, like the three
Yeah,
steps
Well,
well,
down
my
the
I
road,
think
the
even,
well,
reason
and they're
I
not even
think that
trying
kind of
it.
sums up. Yeah, that I
the
think that
re-
sums up a lot of our opinions. Is that like we're not, like you said, we're not expecting exact, but the thing is, it's the fundamental,
they don't
misinterpretation of the fire of the scenes or the
they
characters
didn't
or just the overall narrative, and
they
that's
didn't
why everything
understand
feels so off.
they didn't understand the fundamentals, or they weren't interested in them, because Iroh is not a hard character to understand. He's a very common archetype. He's very well done. I think he's one of the easier characters to get right if you're a competent writer, because
Right.
they already did it for you. Especially, they don't have to figure this out for the first time. Right there. How many video
Yeah.
essays have been written about, like, by just nerdy hacks like us on the internet? Like, this is why this is the greatest character ever. Just do it. Just copy that. Just do it.
Right.
Copy paste it. Like, just get somebody who can do it like
Particularly because
a
any changes you
moderately
make to the
good.
story aren't going to affect Aro. He reacts to everything that scene that he's in. He's not
Mhm.
part of an arc and doesn't need to be. So that's why
Yeah.
he's a
There was
plug and
there
play.
was
It's
Whereas
really
like,
the
well, it's
only
like
others aren't.
or even later on when he's like, when at the final battle, when Zhao is finally revealing, to Iroh his plans, and we're supposed to feel like, well, we're supposed to like Iroh, we're supposed to, it's intending us to feel that shock and that he's disgusted by it, but it does not come off with that same impact.
I,
He still just
I
kind of goes
wonder.
along with it up until the very end. But the thing is, it's like the whole, I'll whatever you do to that
Oh,
fish,
that
I'll unleash
line
it. Like it does
so
not have,
failed.
it doesn't have nearly as much impact as it does in the original
Well,
show because they're
nothing,
not built
like,
up
nothing
that.
does. But see, nothing did, and I want to transition into that soon because you don't have much time left, and there's a lot to talk about in that segment of the show. Iroh just doesn't. The reason why it's more sensitive with Iroh is just because of how pivotal that character's energy is and by that I mean like his character, right? Like the bearing he has, what he represents in the original is just not replicated here. It's nowhere. And in every scene he's in, the direction or the writing is such that it's off. And I don't blame the actor, but there's just there's something about him in addition to it sends it over the top into just like, why is this even, why is it rendered like this, and he's most effective when he's not speaking, as many of the characters are. Like, when he's just listening to something, he looks like he's probably a decent actor, but there aren't very many moments like that. You mentioned Zhao. It's really a crime when, like, Zhao is one of the more successful
Yeah,
adaptations,
very much so.
Yeah.
Like they had
uh,
his conniving nature, his attentive nature, his detail oriented. That kind of stuff was done well, but he had no menace. Like, there was no menace in this the
mm,
way he had in the show for me. And it was almost like he just complete. Was it just me being going crazy, or does his voice change like, near the end of the show? Like, did he just go completely into a different
Uh,
vocal style?
no,
I mean, he was.
I think it was just he did some more broad acting moments, like he had his freak out Moonslayer moment, and that was like,
Yeah,
and that
obviously
felt
that's
very
taking it way far
like
down the line
off,
because it did in the show. I get that,
Well,
but
yeah.
beforehand,
I don't
I
think
can't
his
remember the moment it
accent or like
happened.
his delivery or
I
anything
don't think his
changed.
actual like voice work was that different. I just think it's more a case of he had more lines, more to do, and scenes that, in theory, required him to have more energy. But like
Hmm.
going back to what you were saying, Callan, the reason he doesn't come off the same for me too is the fact that we mentioned before, so much of his accomplishments come from Azula. They
Hmm.
established that, and it Rob's like, obviously Zhao is not meant to be this like ultimate mastermind, but they really, I felt like they really took away what little
Well,
severe impact the character ever had.
they gave everything of his plan to her. It was
Hmm.
very, which also, but it weakened kind of both in that
Yeah.
moment. It's like it also like from her perspective, none of that makes any sense. like this.
And
Yeah,
so
Like,
much
at
of
all.
his setup as well was lost with the omission of John John, which is not a major crime in an adaptation. But when you're
I knew
including
they were
when
not
you
going to do
when you're
John John.
including
Like,
Jet,
I just sensed that.
when you're including
Yeah.
Jet
right.
and you're not including John John, given what one does for the setup of the Fire Nation and the other one doesn't compared to everything else
You
you're
have to
showing
keep in mind also though
Which also,
that
which also robbed us of seeing more Roku. Just
as well.
saying.
Yeah,
just you have to keep in mind that, and I'm with you on this. I don't like Jet, but I think we're very much in the minority on that. He's like a fan favorite character, so I was sure they were going to do Jet.
fair.
You know what I mean? Like they were
Mechanist
always
then,
going to do that.
just any of it. The amount of time they spent in
Jet
Amashu
is-
overall, just to me,
But also, Jet had nothing to do with Omashu in the cartoon, so like they didn't need to work him in that way. But my point is, they're reaching for the low hanging fruit. It's easy to have a guitar, and they didn't really go that far with the Katara Jet thing. It's easy to like play that scene. It's easier to do that than to do some of the groundwork for like some of the more advanced, subtle sort of writing. So I can understand why they reached for that. I'm not surprised by it. I am disappointed by the omission of Jong Jong, but I expected that. I expected that going in.
Yeah,
But
but like,
also,
I'm sorry. You want to get really to the climax now, Matt?
yeah, because like in the last two episodes here, like the very last episode had the most promise for me with like the actual battle. Like it looked pretty good, and they did some really faithful things. But
They
getting
did
there,
a good job of selling the scale. I will say that.
yeah, the visuals are very
yeah,
good. The direction was not for me though. The actual flow of the battle, it was
we'll get
just
to that. But
all
like
over the place.
before even the battle, like the actual water tribe stuff. Like I mean, I already talked about Yue, and or I didn't. We didn't really talk about how she's like got powers in this version and is kind of a completely different character. But and also like she's a fox
Yeah,
spirit
was that the
thing.
original UA's voice when she was in Fox form? Because if not,
don't
that
know.
was
I don't
a
know.
damn accurate voice. Because I could have
I-
sworn that was her original character voice in my ear, but I
I
might have
don't
been
know.
going crazy. I don't know.
I thought it was. I mean, I thought it was the same act
I
throughout, but
couldn't.
I
I couldn't. If I heard it, if I heard her original voice right now, I wouldn't. Without it saying, "Hey, I'm Yue," I wouldn't know it. You know, I don't. I don't. Her character was only there for like, for me. I never was into the Yue character.
Oh, never was I. I just
But
recognized it. And it just
but
didn't match what
anyway,
came later anyway.
but everything to do with all that, that's where it really got the show. Episode 7 to me, it read like the Shyamalan stuff. It was boring. Everything was. There was like hardly any background music in those episodes in particular, until we're doing like a pivotal moment. We didn't talk about like the sad attempt that leaves on the
Oh yeah, with the funeral.
yeah, like that kind of made me cringe because it was like almost a moment, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
Um,
That's why I said it's one of the best scenes in the show, but that doesn't mean it was a particularly good scene. It's
yeah,
just
like
kind of like there, hitting all the right beats
mean,
in a show that
I will
doesn't
say, like,
deserve being set up or
that
pay
was
off.
like
yeah, like,
fanfic territory for me, or like a fan film rather. Is how it
yeah. I
felt.
mean, I will say, like, the confirmation that like Zuko and Liu 10 were close. I mean, I think that's something like we all just kind of assumed, but I guess seeing that and getting that
I
confirmation
thought he
in
was
itself.
gonna have. I thought he was gonna have like the knife because that was something that Iroh gave him in the
Yeah.
cartoon, and then they made up the coin thing, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever.
Well, we do get a knife.
Yeah,
Don't
Kurux.
we?
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. That's my favorite scene. My favorite so bad it's terrible scene. I loved that scene. It was so bad. But,
like confirmation that like Zuko and Liu 10 were close, like that, I guess in itself was okay, but again, it just the direction was so off that it just lost all the impact.
The weakness of it, and God bless the actor playing Zuko for trying. The weakness of that is not him or his delivery even. It's the fact that this whole thing is beginning and ending in this one dialogue. There's no real. It doesn't mean anything until he explains it. I swear there's so much expository dialogue. I swear the guy playing Gyatso ran out of breath when he was explaining who Yang Chen was. Did you notice that?
No.
She also did the like which could have been a great joke, like an airbender running out of breath in the middle of exposition, but it's not played that way. The guy just like ran out of like.
It's funny you say that because there was a moment. There were a few moments throughout this entire series, and I've forgotten the lines off the top of my head now, where I thought they were about to go into a joke, like "Wouldn't that be great?" or "Wouldn't that be convenient?" There was, and it just didn't happen because it was such a weird presentation.
Yeah, I was gonna say the one thing that Iroh said that was a joke, but but the weakness of it was it would have been funny if anyone said it, so it wasn't like a classic
the
Iroh joke.
the plan line.
Plan thing,
Yeah,
that worked for me.
so no plan.
Yeah,
it was the
it worked,
cadence. You
that's
can't
like
not
such
have that be funny back and forth between those two characters.
Yeah, but so that moment worked, and I loved it. I don't. If you guys disagree, that's fine. I loved it when that one lady
Old lady
was
was
smacking
beating
him with her
Zuko with the
broom.
broom.
Yeah,
Yep. I
yes,
knew all
that was
these
so
comic
great.
beats. I
Yeah,
knew it was going to come
yeah,
out.
yeah. That
That
worked
was
out for
so,
me. Like
it was so funny because it was
that
so
was one of the few.
completely out of the blue and random, but also makes perfect
Mhm.
sense. Like this random
Makes
teen
sense,
is
yeah,
beating up a kid,
and
and he's like, "No, you don't be."
it didn't. And it interrupted the flow of the fight without making the fight
Yeah,
completely horrendous. Right?
exactly.
Like it worked.
It
It was
wasn't
such a
bathos. It
whoever
was
did that.
perfect comedy.
Whoever did that
Genius.
special commendation. Like I don't know whose idea that was, but you elevated the show one whole star in my mind just with that moment. But getting back to this water tribe thing. So this is something I need to this and we're running out of time, but I need to talk about this moment.
We still got some time.
Yeah, this was like emblematic of the problem with this mentality of having this. In the original version, so they have the Han character, Yume's boyfriend or
Mm.
betrothed ex-boyfriend in this kind of I don't know.
He's just kind of there, and we're supposed to care about, but
The
don't.
Northern Water Tribe is more respectful to women, except for Paku in this version. But because like Han is a total asshole in the like a chauvinist asshole in the cartoon. So they shaved off all of that and made him like likable. And I actually said to myself, "Are they going to kill him?" And they did, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, okay." But
No
all
one
right,
cares.
you didn't
You know,
need
he
to.
had a
And
good moment. The
somebody
moment
else
with
killed
the
off another.
chief looking at him is like, "Yes, good man." It's like, we don't care about these characters. Like this
Yeah, it
doesn't
was weird.
work.
But,
We only
but,
spend
but
2 episodes in this
But the
area.
reason I bring up, but the reason I brought up Han, right? Because I don't care about his character. Like they can do whatever they want with him. But there was a scene that I thought that's so bad that it will only work if you then have a payoff, and there was no payoff. Um, and I had a bet. I was watching this with my family, and I had a bet with my dad, and he said, "Is that it's not even going to come back, is it?" And I said, "No, it's not to. I mean, that's so bad. Like they're not going to just leave that hanging." And I lost the bet. And what I'm getting at is in the cartoon, they have a plan to infiltrate the Fire Nation Armada using this armor that they've had lying around. And Sokka says, "Well, that's the wrong style. It's got these
Hmm.
shoulder spiny things; those are gone." And they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, Sokka, tell us what you know." And Han's going to lead the mission. Ultimately, that doesn't come to anything but a joke, and possibly the character dying and being thrown overboard into
In
the
the
sea.
freezing cold water and doesn't
Um,
get picked up. Yeah, he's dead.
yes. From this, Han meets Sokka. It's like, "Oh, tell me about Fire Nation armor. Is it made of metal or leather?"
Yeah,
Leather. And
exactly.
does it have spiny things on its shoulder? And I
Yeah.
said, no. That must mean they're going to do the infiltration, right? And my dad was like, "Does it though? Or maybe they're just going to leave it hanging." And it fucking bang. Like I was like, "Are you
It was
kidding
just they
me?"
changed
Like
it was like a snapshot of, hey guys, we've changed Han. Look, he's nice. He's being respectful of Sokka's experience right off the gate. Isn't
that's
that great?
fine.
We're taking out all
That's
of his
that's
They
fine.
don't do
Who
problems.
would
anything.
ask that question without motivation or without reason? Who would ask those questions? In that way. It's this completely unnatural Shyamalan-esque
It's so
dialogue. Like
dumb.
it's like
Oh my
that's
gosh.
terrible, terrible. Like and it was like a wink, wink into this thing that happened in the show, but there was a purpose for it in the show.
Yeah, and
There
all
was a
the
reason
winks,
for it in the
like we said at
show.
the start, all the winks throughout the entire of this adaptation were just, hey, remember this thing? Look, here it is. But which is fine to an extent, as long as you do it naturally and well executed, which they haven't done here. But it's what they chose to do that for. The beats they chose to take and show were like, why are we seeing this and not John or not anything else? You know,
See,
the time they choose to
this was
spend is
always
just
the
off.
thing. This was always the thing I said about Shyamalan's version. It's like, yes, you can complain about everything. It's all terrible. Like that, you could talk
Yeah.
about the whitewash casting. You could talk about like the disrespect of the lore, getting the names wrong, and everybody can beat the drum about that moment where a bunch of Earthbenders throw that little potato across the street. I
That's
get
always
that.
my go-to.
The biggest problem was writing an unconvincing story, like writing people behave and act and say things that no one would ever do in that version, and they do the same thing here. It's just not quite as noticeable. Like the most important thing is not the bending. Yeah, that's you got to have Avatar and bending. It should look cool. The most important thing is the writing, the direction, is knowing what you're doing with your story, and just having your characters say and do things for a specific reason. And the show was really, the cartoon was masterful at like having just these little scenes that were so well done in a filmic sense. You would never see dialogue that's bad. in the cartoon. How is that? How is it that all you have to do is lift most of this material straight, and everything you change, it not only is it not quite as strong, it's full on missing the mark, or it's completely unmotivated.
Or
It's so
undercutting
arbitrary to have that.
whatever change you're trying to make work. Like you'll say, okay, we'll
Yeah,
change it and tweak it this way, and we'll just immediately undercut it by
you can change
misunderstanding your own
things.
message.
I think you should
Right.
change things,
Yeah.
as Evan said. You can change things, but the problem is
Make it
just, what have you
make
done?
it add substance to it. Don't just either do it poorly or don't do it at all. I mean, there's I don't know.
The the Avatar Kurik thing, like I
Okay,
don't know. I
so
don't.
here's like the one thing I will say about that. The one thing I'm willing to give this, like with the ideas, like I like the idea that like obviously Kurik having a strong, a connection to like the spirit realm is something that's already been established. That's it. That's whatever. The idea of so you have this knife. Now, the idea that something forged in the spirit realm can harm spirits in the physical realm, like I get
I think
it. I
I think
get it
that's the question.
fundamentally, but it was just I mean,
Was
do we
that
even
was that a was that a thing in the Kyoshi books? Because Kurik was the one before her. He was the Avatar before her. Was
I
I
that
have
can't
knife?
recall about the knife. I know that the spirit world
Okay,
I
connected
don't
stuff
know.
was all set up in the
But like
books.
that
like
knife,
the idea
that
the
that
the
knife.
idea that the knife exists and how it's so bad. Like
I
sorry,
mean,
sorry,
it's
Max.
a
So
small
so
detail, but
so
it's stupid that it doesn't have any setup. It just comes in
it's
when it
not
needs to.
Comes
it's
out
not like it's not this is it is a small detail, but it's a big problem. Okay,
Mm.
and it's not just the knife, it's everything to do with this. Hey, you overthought this. They cooked up their own mythology for one night a year on the ice
Yeah, the
moon.
ice moon. Yeah,
Like
exactly.
on
And
the
it
ice
also didn't
moon.
show any of it. Again, didn't get to see any of going back to the direction of
Yeah,
the ebb and flow of the battle. We don't get to see the pre
yeah.
moon. Don't get to see the post. Don't
looks
get to
the
see the during.
same. I mean,
So
as
it's
any
all just
other
generic waterbending, and then
I don't
waterbending's
even
off.
think that they established that the moon is full, like it means that the waterbenders are
Nope, they
stronger or any
didn't.
of that.
well, they do
But
bring that up. They do bring that up.
Only
I will
after
bring
that,
that
I
up.
though.
didn't notice it. Like I'd be curious to see that because I was wondering whether they
It was
established
only
that. And
when
also,
as they were talking about it in the sky. It wasn't anything pre-set up.
but anyway, the 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 spirits are only in the realm for like the one night in this version. That's dumb already. Like the whole point of them is that they crossed into our world. Like
Mm.
that's what Roku says in the original. Um, the fact that we also don't get to see them until it's time to like disrupt them, it's also a weakness because the audience doesn't know what the goal is. The audience doesn't know. The audience has to know. What do we stand to lose here?
Yeah.
Like when the battle is.
What are the
It,
stakes?
it's got to, you have to understand that like on some level you understand what's going on at the Battle of Helm's Deep.
I was
Lord of the
literally a
Rings on the
nanosecond
map,
saying
you know
the
what I
same
mean.
thing. The Lord of the Rings, going back to the example, is that one. The shot by shot
You don't need
build
to
up of everything
you
to do
don't
with that is the
even
perfect
you don't
example.
need to know the history of Gondor and Rohan. I don't know all that. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. In that moment, these people are facing annihilation if they don't win here. Okay, like I got it. That's the point. What what are they going to lose? If I hadn't watched the cartoon, I don't know that they're looking for spirits that are look like koi fish and it's this awesome living yin yang thing. I don't know that, unless I watched the cartoon. You should have established, and the way we get there, where we established that entire location is because Momo took a bullet.
Yep.
Like,
Also
people are
got
dying
crushed.
all around her.
Momo should have just been paced, by the way.
Also,
That's
I
what I
actually
mean.
thought I actually thought for like half a second, are they gonna kill
That's what I'm
Momo? Like,
saying.
Yeah,
I
I
guess
thought they were going to
That's
kill
that's
Momo.
the moment I'm
But the funny
saying.
thing is, because one, they've done
My
Momo so
point is,
well. Momo was done basically perfectly for what they could do in that budget and that show. But also
she's known
getting out of the
she's known
way.
Sokka. She's known Sokka for 2 minutes. This was it was rushed in the cartoon, their little
Yeah.
romance. This was super rushed. She just met this cat like yesterday. You know what I mean? And now she's all, oh no, you're lemur. Let me take it. Your people are all dying.
Yeah.
Your people are
you're
dying
taking
around
the
you.
most
Let
sacred
me take
place
your
in the
lemur, the sacred. That's how you're going to introduce the Oasis.
I know.
You should have had maybe have them fall in love at the Oasis or something, or just establish that location
Using the whole set they
before
didn't beforehand. They had
before
all the
Momo
fights
takes a
happening
bullet.
elsewhere. Katara v Zuko
It
was up
was
in the Oasis area, which is it's again sounds like a
right.
small thing,
yeah, in the
but
cartoon.
that's
Yeah,
but it was a perfect set piece.
there was a, there was a reason. There's a reason why all that stuff worked. It's like I was talking about the first Avatar state moment in the first episode. Like the point of everything was stronger. It's not just that you have to do it this way. It's just analyze why they did what they did when they did it.
They needed the full
Okay?
moon above to make
Like,
the point about the full moon, to set the stages of each fight,
yeah,
the equal bearing, the Katara winning, the Zuko winning, that being
it's
the
really
small
bad.
scale equivalent of what's happening on the large scale of the entire battle. The incoming armada, you attack the armada head on, can't beat it, you fall back. You run the walls gets breached, you fall back. These aren't just nerd details. They set up the
But also,
stakes
like,
and payoff
the
for the
fight,
ebb and flow of the battle,
the
which is
fight,
why Helm's Deep is
the,
perfect, because it does that just perfectly.
and the fight between Katara and Zuko was because she was trying her best to stop him from stealing Aang, who was in the spirit world. You know what I mean? In this version, she's not really guarding him. It just happens. You know what I mean? And even like when she like creates like an ice shield in the show, he was like stuck behind like a wall of ice and he burst out of it.
Yeah.
And this, it was just like a little barrier of ice that he like
And
walked
he's
into.
looking at
It's
it,
his own
yeah.
fault when it like when
Just to
it blows up
insult
in his
her.
face. Yeah, there was no. Again, the word is
And even
motivation.
the
Everything
line,
is so
"You got yourself a
unmotivated.
master." Actually, I didn't. I'm just a master now.
She
Yeah,
didn't,
for
and
real.
also
It's
like,
not fair,
but
you know?
also he calls her you little peasant. And I'm going, okay, in the cartoon, he stole her necklace and he's had those moments, you know, with her.
Exactly, it
In
worked
this,
there.
did he ever speak to her like before that?
I
In
Don't
this
don't
think
think
version,
so.
did he ever speak to her?
Don't think
See,
so.
there's not that buildup of like for you to have that kind of bantering back and forth. Like you can't just get there, you know, and you got to take your time and extend out the pointless boomy, and everything else is so rushed. You know, everything else is just. And I'm sick of like this. People say, "Oh, like just no one can ever be like pleased or satisfied, or you can never do it well enough." You can do it much better than this. And to be a fan, you don't need to embrace bad version of the thing you love. You don't. Okay, it's okay to have standards for things. All right, like these are not nitpicks.
right.
What is a little bit of a nitpick, but I still think my favorite scene is in the middle of all this chaos. Bang, my knife is
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Yeah, like
I can't
I
help you, but
couldn't
I'm going to
believe it. I
materialize out of nowhere to warn you that a
couldn't.
knife is vaguely pinging on my
Oh,
radar.
That was right out of that reminded me of like when the ghost Yoda turned
another,
up, you know, it
another
looked like the
Obi-Wan.
puppet Yoda. You know, like, I was like,
Yep.
this is so bad. But and also correct. He's wearing a damn polar bear pelt, and he's all bear the unbearability of the. Like, he was like bear the you bear the bear or like what was it? Bear
Uh,
the unbearable.
how can
What
I
was he
take this
saying?
seriously? I
Like
can't.
And also the point,
it
you
was like
must do this alone. You must do this alone, because we had
the whole
failings, because
idea.
we had people. You
Yeah,
must do it alone. It's like, what are you
yeah.
talking about? It's every
But
one
like
of them were doing that.
and I kind
Yeah,
of forgot about but when his ghost turned up outside was like, "Aang, I sense my knife." And I said, "Are you kidding me? What's happening here?" Like that, I had tears in my eyes. I was laughing so hard. Like I loved that scene. It was like Batman and Robin.
It
It was
really
like
was, to an
it
extent.
was terrible. You
Oh,
know, I
God.
loved that.
yeah, like getting into the finale, it's like I will say this much, like the actual sequence of the Zhao, killing the spirit, I thought, visually, I like the fact that like the sepia tone goes kind of in and out when you see the moon disappear, and then obviously we know from like the bending and the fact that they can actually do death now. It's like you actually see them being unable to block the fireballs. I liked how they really sold that aspect of it, but again, getting back to the character standpoint, since it was built up so terribly and they've put so little, story emphasis on this, it again, it just all flash without the substance, and that's really disappointing because this should be like the way they play it up. I mean, they even bring up the fact that if Zhao were to kill both fish, he would destroy not only waterbending but every single member of like waterbending culture. Like this is
Which is a
literally
stupid thing to add anyway, because that's a problem. If they have a
yeah,
fish that just someone kills, an entire race dies out. I mean, what are they doing
right.
just leaving that open to the world? You know, just
It's
silly,
it's it's it's
little
it's
nerd
set it's
critique,
set up
but
menace for no reason. I mean, I guess their logic behind that would be like, oh, this is only something that could be done on this one
yeah,
night.
it was to set up the joke. Like,
With
I'm
this
not a
one
monster. I'm
particular,
just going to kill the moon.
with,
It was just set up for that, basically.
yeah,
They could have left it as
with
it
this
was.
one particular weapon. So I guess that was their attempt. But again, the fact that, like I said, it's built up so poorly and just there's no point to it. And it's like, and even oh my god, it even leads into like some really ham-fisted stuff from Zhao. Where it's like, master of 3 elements doesn't really
I
have
mean, he was
it's like,
schlocky in that scene, even the original. That was him full tilted
yeah,
into mentalist
Oh yeah, he
anyway.
was.
But
of course.
I
But
just
again,
oh, the
my
Moon Slayer.
family
just
and I,
doesn't.
We were all shouting at the screen when like his big plan was to fly a glowing orb over into the northern water tribe, like because they had the balloon, which they didn't have like in the original
Yeah.
version. Like and they were glowing, and it was like, okay, if I was a waterbending person, like shoot that thing down, whatever
Just
that is.
just ice
The
knives.
big, the
Done.
big, the big, the big
Like,
floating Fire Nation emblem up there, like get rid of that. That was so silly.
Uh,
But
they
yeah,
just
like
did it. I mean, they
Zhao.
did it obviously so Sokka could feel more
Also,
guilt, and
like
they have that mechanic, from before. So, again, it's like,
I,
well, like I said, there's no
I
point
was
to it all. We don't care.
and I was giggling again at his death scene, like when he got shot from behind by Iroh.
yeah.
That was so anticlimactic and
Well,
stupid. It was like
actually,
The whole
I
point of
hated
that
that.
was Zuko having
I
a
did
moment
too,
to
but
reach
like
out to him,
yeah,
and he's like, "Nope,
yeah,
He was
gone."
well,
refusing on
'cause
purpose. Like, no.
I know that I am somebody who doesn't give a crap about Zhao, but that was a strong moment in the
Hmm.
show because it showed that also, more importantly than his pride, it showed that Zuko's a good person at heart, which you
Yeah.
need.
And on top of
You
that,
know,
another small detail just to make it a triad of reasons to keep it was that it specifically showed that the spirit was only killing the firebenders, or the Fire Nation rather, which is another thing he does in the show.
it
But like he
also
was calling
very much
everybody
about the
firebenders, not
spirit
Fire
that
Nation members.
happens.
But
Yeah, that happens after Aang's been like excused from like Aang's no longer a part of that. That's very specifically the vengeful
yeah,
spirit.
exactly.
So
And
yeah,
it
it
just
worked very
undercuts
well.
the fact that that was very targeted, which is not
Yeah,
just a
so
nerd
I
critique.
was
It shows it sets up the stakes and the payoff for the whole scenario up there, and the
yeah,
balance
that's
of
what I mean.
spirituality and the violence
There is
against
a
the peace, etc.
we walk the line between nerd critique and just like general what's a stronger version of this scene.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like which we already have, and even with wanting to make changes, can easily imagine.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like it's just not good. You know, it's like there are things I thought there were individual scenes, individual moments, whether visually or rather or the whole or just conceptually or the whole shebang on a rare occasion where everything was working, where things were okay. But in general, the show was like
Well,
I didn't think I could be disappointed. I wasn't really.
yeah.
I was disappointed mostly by the portrayal of Iroh and the terrible avatars.
Avatars, yeah, those are the
But I
two
wasn't
biggest
really like let
crimes.
down because I didn't have anything invested in this.
Exactly, and it kind of just definitely sums up my opinion overall on the show as well. It's like, again, even going into it with the expectations that I had, even if there was like maybe a little, skewed positively and negatively with certain points, I guess what just really amazes me about this whole thing overall is just how it disappointed me and how it impressed me because I feel like everything I think as we've covered up till now was in reverse. Like everything that we thought was going to disappoint us ended up, if not, I mean, not wowing us necessarily, but at the very least being
It was like a
competent enough
contrast picture. Everything
about it.
expected to be wrong
Yeah,
was right. Everything expected to be right was wrong.
yeah.
Almost not quite that way, but
The
yeah,
yin,
close
the
to.
yin and yang switched, ironically.
Mm.
Um, but then everything that I at least hoped was going to be good, let the least expected, was just so like talk about missing the mark. And the fact that it is such a fundamental misfire of so many of these characters and so many of these plot lines, it just kind of like again, and I just continuously want to stress that I appreciate that this adaptation tried to do its own thing, but at the end of the day, you need to get at the bare minimum like these characters have to be recognizable. And to me, so many of these characters and so many of these storylines were so unrecognizable from what they are not only like disregard what they're intended to be, but what they're supposed to be that it just made the entire experience just perplexing at worst. Sorry, perplexing at best and painful at worst. And even though there are, like I said, even going through the positives, the things that they added, even at their best, it's only confirming to me things that I'm, at least in my head, I'm either pretty sure was already the case or can at least imagine in just as good, or if, in some cases, I would say maybe even a better way. And because of that, it just kind of the whole experience just comes out as like, as we've been saying up till now, 60 40s, 70 30. And it's definitely disappointing because, for everything that this series did right, it does like three or four things just horribly, and that's
Confusingly
honestly
horribly. Like not just oh, this is
confusingly.
god
Yeah.
awful. It's
Confusion.
just like
The
what?
confusion.
What?
Like,
Like, that's just it. Like with this review, I know this review's probably come off as kind of disjointed. That's because we're disjointed watching this, and this
the
show is
show
disjointed.
the show is confused. The people who made this are confused. Okay, there's a
Yeah,
serious confusion. Okay, so the word is confused. But
yeah. So Yeah, and that's why, again, like for all of us, I think it definitely. I mean, obviously we don't give ratings, but this is not. I mean, here's the thing though, like I would almost recommend this as like someone like
As a
as like a
case
lesson.
study.
Like if I were,
Case
yeah,
study
like
in
if I were teaching,
confusion.
if I were no no no, like if I were teaching a class in like film adaptation or something or something like that, like I would point to this as an example of like here's some like how not to do it and how to do it in ways elementary that could theoretically work but is still not done correctly. So yeah, very odd. And I know that's a confusing statement, but again, it's because this entire experience has been very confusing for all of us, I imagine.
Mm.
It was unexpected, that's for sure. But
Hmm.
anyway, are we signing off here
Yeah, that's
now?
probably
Are
about all
we
we have to say
at
on it,
that
really.
point?
Can't really add anything to what Evan has said there. Unexpected is the word, confusing is the word. I went into this expecting and instead I got which, is that a positive, is that a negative? I don't know. At the very least, we found some things amusing about it. At the very worst, they destroyed the avatars
It
and
was.
Iroh. So,
It was amusing, but almost never for the reason that was intended,
yep.
scene by scene. And
Yes.
But props for the
I only
broom lady
recommend
and
it.
props for the plan joke. And there
Yes,
are a few
Bless
more
you,
for sure.
details
bless
as
you.
well,
Like,
I'm sure.
there are moments where you'll get something out of this.
I recommend it only if you're a serious diehard and you really have nothing better to do. But if you have Netflix, watch Blue Eye Samurai instead.
Yes, which we
But
will
don't
be
watch it
talking
with your
about at some
children.
point.
Don't be watching it with your children. It's not for children. Let them enjoy innocence. It's not for children. Okay, and don't let them watch Invincible either. Naughty people. You know.
Oh.
But yeah,
Yeah.
more to come in the
And
future. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But for now, this has been Fanalysis, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I am Callan, and I still don't have an outro.
My knife is near.
Oh boy. Evan Nova 95. We hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys later.
Hop on one leg. Ugh.